It's good to see so many of you here. When I woke up this morning, I was just wondering whether I would be addressing a half-empty room. And when we landed, the first thing I checked was how many people were here. And I was told that each and every one who had registered and had confirmed as of yesterday morning had landed. So thank you all for coming here. As Sunil said, this is one of our flagship event. Let me not get it wrong. Right, this is marketing, the event where we get a small set of customers. We don't get customers in hundreds. We have an engagement with the customers, try to make it as personalized as possible, get you all, as she said, over to the ITC where you'll be talking to our team of developers and people who actually work on the product and who support you. So you get a sense of what it's like there, and you hear from people who actually develop the product, not just from the salespeople who keep saying yes, yes, yes to everything. So you'll hear a lot of no's tomorrow, and you'll hopefully be much better off at the end of the evening tomorrow. We're in absolutely exciting times, 6.5 years, by the way, in CA and counting, and over 20 years in the IT industry in India. Absolutely exciting times. Exciting times, particularly in CA, given what we do, the markets we address with the portfolio that we have. I think we're right in the center of all the action. And over the next day or so, you'll get a sense of why I'm saying so. Yeah? We're actually undergoing tremendous transformation in the IT industry. Recent developments in digital have removed constraints and opened up opportunities for businesses as well as individuals, for us as people, as we live our day-to-day lives. Look at it from an IT or a business standpoint. You want to know what your customer is saying, your customer opinion. Without the narrow lens of being constrained by the narrow lens of a market survey where you're doing, just getting feedback from a few hundred or a few thousand people, or a focus group, even smaller group. Social media helps you do that. You want your people, the people in your organization, your teams, your colleagues, to be operational and productive wherever they are, whatever time of the day. Mobility allows you to do that. Want better sales forecasts? Want better forecast for manufacturing and production planning? That's the promise of big data. So as I said, it's exciting times in IT. Now, what does that mean for CIOs and teams in IT? Puts a huge pressure on all of you. You have charters for getting onto the cloud, building a new app, going mobile, all faster than you've ever done it before. I was recently with the CIO of one of the country's largest banks, and he was saying, Sunil, I've been in IT and in this bank for over 20 years, and it's never been more exciting. Never been more challenging than this. He says, I come in the morning at 8:30, I'm in office, and I don't know when the day ends. It just goes on and on and on, right? There are challenges, but the opportunities are huge. And he says, right now, as the CIO of the bank, I'm no longer a back-end function. I am in the front and the center of the business. Questions asked to me are not about, whether an IT infrastructure, the IT infrastructure I set up is working, how well it's working, response times, and so on. He said we have gone way beyond that. Now the question to me is, how can you help the business? What new revenue streams can we generate? How can we serve our customers better? How can we get directly in touch with the customers? How can we get feedback, instantaneous feedback, and incorporate that into our into the solutions and services that we offer? Right? I'm sure this is a challenge that each one of you is facing in your respective businesses, irrespective of which industry you are in. Am I making sense? Or, yeah, I see a lot of heads nodding. So IT and being in business has never been more exciting. Now, before I get into where we are and what challenges we're facing, what the opportunities are, and how life looks like today, let's just take a step back. Now, this is a graph for the human population starting from 1000 AD. I could have gone back in time by a few thousand years, and it wouldn't have looked very different on this side. Essentially a horizontal line. The population was growing extremely slowly. Development was achingly slow. You could say it was almost absent, at least not visible here. And then all of a sudden, here, mid-1700, that's the mid-18th century, something very sudden and profound happened. You know what that was? Absolutely, the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution changed life like never before. It was developments in metallurgy, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and so on, which transformed the way people lived, did business, and just about everything in the world. At the heart of the Industrial Revolution was the steam engine. The steam engine removed limitations on muscle power, both human as well as animal, that had constrained development till then. And you see, the graphs moved almost vertically upwards. This was what two authors, Brynjolfsson and McAfee, call the first machine age. Fast forward now to around 2000. They say now that we are in the second machine age. Now, computers are doing to business and life what the steam engine did during the Industrial Revolution. If the steam engine removed constraints of muscle power, computers today are removing the constraints of computing and mental power like never before. Incidentally, the steam engine wasn't discovered during the Industrial Revolution. It was discovered much before that, or invented much before that. It went through some iterations, and it was only around the Industrial Revolution that it took off. They're saying that the same applies now to computing power and computers and IT. We've had IT in existence for a long time now. It's only now that we are seeing exponential growth, and they believe that it's going to take off and impact our lives like never before. Now, the first phase of IT was essentially about automating tasks, converting everything that we knew and we did into a set of rules. How many of you have written a program at some point of time in your lives? Anyone here? A few hands going up. You know what it's like. You have to list down all the steps in excruciating detail. And you make a mistake with a comma or a full stop or a parenthesis, it's all gone. So you're writing all that you're supposed to do, the rules, in detail. You feed it into a computer, and you get the output. The first phase was about that. Codify, digitize, and replicate. Certain assumptions that were made during the first phase, that if a rule cannot be written for something, a computer cannot help. That is the assumption that was made. So complex language, empathy, where matters involving human emotion and so on, computers wouldn't be able to help. In fact, I talked about codifying everything. The reality is that we cannot tell everything that we know. Do you agree with me? For example, I know Uday. I know him well. Every time I see him, I can recognize him. Now, can I actually describe how I can recognize him? Can I write down the rules? I can't. Right? So the assumption was that when it came to something like recognizing a human face, where rules couldn't be written, computers couldn't do anything, couldn't function, couldn't help you. Is that the case today? Now we are in the second wave of the machine, the second machine age, where the assumptions made about what computers can do and can't do have changed. Three categories which originally were thought of as being completely out of bounds of computers, purely the preserve of human beings and natural intelligence, have now been conquered. The first one about interacting with the physical world. We all know what autonomous cars are doing. Would anyone have believed about 15 years back that you could have a car driving through the streets of a city without a driver? Language processing and speech recognition. It's been there since ages. I remember when I was studying engineering, that's maybe 100 years back, there was to be some reference in the material that I had to read about language, about voice recognition. But it was awful then. It was awful till very recently. Awful till very recently. You could hardly, you thought you spoke, you tried various accents, you tried it with various speeds, what you got was absolute junk. Today, do you know that there is an online translator on Skype? When you're speaking to someone, you can set the language. Now, obviously, limitations on the number of languages it can handle, but you speak in one language and the person, it gets translated online on the other side. That's the level to which voice recognition has got to now. Something that was thought is almost very difficult for computers to do. Prose, writing prose. Do you know it's possible for computers today, if you feed the P&L, the latest P&L of the profit and loss account of a company and the balance sheet, the details, it's possible for the computer to churn out an algorithm to churn out the report in text form. Games today reports on games are being written, the small snippets that you get for some of these smaller games, irrespective of which game it is, football, cricket, or whatever it is, you can feed in the scores, and a computer can generate a small article on it. So that's where it's got to. Natural language generation. So it's got to a stage where you're, replacing computers are replacing people. Third area is problem solving. Now, a good example of that is face recognition. And do you know that computers are now able to identify emotions? There's something called emotion science, and they identify every movement of the muscles on your face by something that they call action units. And there are supposed to be 45 action units that define the movements of the muscles on your face. And various permutations and combinations of that can list down a range of emotions. So see the level of complexity that computers are now able to handle. Now, we are all in the IT functions, the IT departments in our organizations, and our colleagues are exposed to all this. What happens to the expectations of our colleagues of us. Uday, you know what we all expect of you in CA, right? So if this is the kind of situation you're finding yourselves in, you obviously have to be able to cope with it. Now this, as you all know, is all possible through machine learning. Within that, it's deep learning. And the concept is that computers don't have to be programmed anymore. They just have to be shown thousands and thousands, almost millions in some cases, of images which are tagged, and they can figure out on their own. For example, you show a machine images, millions of images of cells that have cancer, and say that tag them as with cancer. Another set without cancer, tag them without cancer. And do you know that today, algorithms are much better at predicting cancer than the most expert radiologists are? In fact, a cousin of mine is a radiologist, and he accepts that. He's been doing this for over 20 years, and he says, yes, I mean, he has access to these algorithms. He says they are better off. They are able to spot markers that the most experienced doctors cannot. Voice recognition is another example. Do you know that it's possible to clone anyone's voice by picking up just between a 5 to 7 minute sample of that person's voice from the internet? And in about 80% of the time, that voice, that cloned voice, will pass through the biometric detection test. I've just incidentally activated this. It says for ABC Bank, I'll not name the bank, it's the bank that I do have one of my cards with. It says for ABC Bank, my voice is my password. I'm using it, right? I've set a small credit limit on I've just lowered the credit limit on my credit card. I want to see how it works. I wouldn't be surprised if very soon, right, someone uses that and I see a credit transaction. They say, yeah, your voice was hacked. That's the reality of the times we're finding ourselves in. So we're in what the authors call the second machine age. Now, what does this mean for organizations? What does it mean for us as people in our day-to-day lives? And what does it mean for the jobs that we do? I'm saying it in the context of the situation that all of you are finding yourselves in, the challenges that the current environment poses to you, and the opportunities that are there. Let's look at the impact that the second machine age or computers and IT have had on organizations. It's led to what is called the exponential organization. Organizations were essentially about acquiring assets, people, machinery. The more people, land and machinery and assets. You had more assets, you became more powerful. You had more power. You had greater valuation. Is that the case today? They were about linear thinking. If you had input X, you got output Y with input X. If you made it 2X, it became 2Y. Put in some automation, maybe it became 3Y, maybe it became 4Y. But that linear relationship still stayed. Today's organizations are not about linear thinking. They are about exponential thinking. Uber is a classic example of exponential thinking. At the heart of these organizations is IT and software. Yeah? It's not so much about the people. It's not so much of, yes, they've built an ecosystem, but the heart of that is IT and software. Just narrate an example to you to give you a sense of how business has been moving and how these exponential organizations are changing the rules of the game within their respective industries. In 2007, what happened? The iPhone was launched. Around that time, which was all of us had phones off, Nokia, right? Nokia was a $140 billion organization, market cap of $140 billion. They bought this company called Navtech for about $8.1 billion. Navtech was in the road mapping and navigation business. They had sensors in about 250,000 miles, covering 250,000 miles of roads in about 15-odd countries in Europe, 35-odd cities. Now, Nokia thought that this was their way of combating competition from Apple on the one side, with its newly launched product, and all the power that Google was gaining. So they put in $8.1 billion into what was essentially an capital-intensive business which required a lot of capital. They spent $8.1 billion. Around the same time, a small company in Israel called Waze was started. Remember, Navtech had sensors in 35 cities. You know what Waze was using to get the same output? They were crowdsourcing the same information through the mobile phones of users in the cities. Was any investment required for each additional sensor? 2 years later, Waze had as many sensors, human sensors with mobile phones, as Navtech had. 4 years later, they had about 5 times the number of sensors. For them, a sensor was all about a person acquiring a phone, for which they had to do nothing. 2012 or so, Nokia sold Navtech for, Nokia had bought Navtech for 8.1. 2012, Nokia's market cap was 8.1 billion. From 140 billion, it dropped to 8.1 billion. And at the same time, Google bought Waze for 1.1 billion. You know what's happened of Nokia? You know where Google is today. A classic example of how an exponential organization has rewritten the rules of the game, changed the boundaries of competition within an industry, and outsmarted the incumbent. I've just given you one example of how this has happened. I'm sure all of you, if you think and you look around, you will see many more such examples of startups using IT and technology and software to completely rewrite the rules of the game and challenge incumbents who've been in business with huge amount of assets built up over years, if not decades. So that's as far as the organization is concerned. We know organizations have become flatter. We know that communication is, we know what email has done to our organizations, how fast, how easy it's to communicate across, if at all there is a hierarchy within the organization, across the different levels, how easy it's to get across to the CEO of the organization. We know what impact IT has done. What about the impact that IT has had on products? Technology so far changed, for a very long time, changed the way products were manufactured, changed the way products were sold. But the basic construction of the product didn't change for a very long time. A product had a physical part and in some cases an electrical part. That is how a product was. Today, with all that technology can do, we are in what the Harvard Business Review called the age of smart connected products. In every product, you have compute, you have storage, you have software, you have sensors, you have connectivity. All products are becoming smart. Yeah? Now look at this. I talked about face recognition, emotion recognition, and so on. Think of the day when you have a chip on your refrigerator, senses stress levels are high on your face based on the images it captures of your face, and auto-locks itself so that you don't engage in binge eating. That's what technology is getting to. Now, what this means is that products can be controlled, they can be monitored. You can decide the manufacturer. So far, it was a kind of a one-off relationship or a one-time relationship, a transaction. The product was sold, and you hardly ever got in touch with the manufacturer. If you did, it was when things went wrong. Today, the manufacturer can stay in touch with you and your product even well after he's sold it because of the components that I spoke about and the fact that products today are smart and connected. Now, what does this mean in terms of the competition? What does it mean for you as CIOs and as the IT experts within your organization? They'll all come to you and say, hey, we've connected this. What about security? We've connected our products, right? How can we analyze all the data that the product we've collected out of this product? How can we do some analytics on it? How do we stand vis-a-vis competition? Everything online, everything instantaneous. Doesn't it put pressure on all of you? Hasn't your life changed thanks to IT? As I said, the CIO said, yes, it's becoming challenging, but the opportunities are also tremendous. Look at all that you can do with a smart, connected product. All that you can do with your customer, with your competition, with your partners, your dealers, distributors, all the stakeholders of your organization. See the huge impact that IT can have on the products that you're selling. What about jobs? The concept of having a good job, meaning that you were working for a large company, great designation, was a legacy of the 80s, 90s, maybe 2000. Today, it's absolutely socially perfectly acceptable to be a freelancer. Organizations were formed because that was the best way to get people to work and deliver, to add value, to deliver what was required for the economy. Now, with the power of what was still very recently that of a high-end computer in the form of a mobile phone in your pocket and access to social media and connectivity, is there really a need for an organization, for a company to get things done by individuals? It's the age of freelancing. It's the age of the on-demand economy. You don't need to hire all those people. You don't need all those large teams with you. You don't need those hierarchies. You can get people in, get them out when you want them. You can transact with them on a project basis, not needing rules. What does that mean in terms of the nature of the jobs that are getting done? Earlier, it was thought that it would only be the low-end tasks. I told you, if today a radiologist feels threatened or has come to terms with reality that he could be replaced by an algorithm. Take any industry, and it's not very different. Wealth managers can be replaced by algorithms. The question is, which jobs will be there, which won't? There was a survey, I think, which was done recently, which said that about 47% of the jobs in the US can be taken over by robots. Now, what does this mean to us as individuals? What does this mean to us as parents who are getting our children in schools which are working the way they did 100 years back. So life, IT, software, and technology has changed our lives like never before. Now, what are the underlying drivers for this change? Broadly, these 5 areas. We all know the Moore's law of computing. Processing power doubles every 18 months, right? We've seen this for so many years. Heard of it in the past, that are we getting to a level where quantum mechanics will come in the way of this doubling? We haven't seen it yet. And if we do, there are other products like other materials like graphene and others which will take over. So the reality is there's a huge amount of computing power that's available with the smartphones. Ubiquitous connectivity. We all know how easy it's to get connected wherever we are. Any part of the country, any part of the world, today you're connected. And connected not only with smartphones, but as I said, even products are getting connected. We're talking about smart cities in the Indian context. I'm not sure how many of you are really keeping in touch with what's happening, but we made some really good progress in terms of actually getting there. Now it's the availability, the infrastructure is going to get set up. It's the availability of the apps and our willingness to actually use that which will determine how this connectivity will change the lives that we live. At the heart of all this is software. Talked about machine learning, deep learning. It's software which really drives businesses. AI has been there for long, right? Again, when I was studying my engineering, there used to be expert systems and artificial intelligence, some form or the other. They would say that when would we get to the day where machines would replace people, when machines would be as smart as people? We're talking about it for over 25 years. It's only now, with the proliferation of data, that we're able to see the benefits of this computing power. We're able to see the benefits of artificial intelligence. Because as I said earlier, you don't need to program computers. You don't need to write the program. Machines can learn on their own. That's because of the proliferation of data. So that's big data. I spoke about machine learning. So as I see it, the 5 broad areas are the drivers for the change that we find ourselves in today.